So since I can't hold the camera with one hand, we did use the brass drift, okay? And we went in between here. It's long enough, and I tapped on the edge of it here with a hammer, and you can see that it came loose. It wiggled right out. It beat right out with no problem. So we do have that shaft loose. It didn't give us see that it's loose. It didn't give us a hard time or not, so we can just lay that aside right there. And so now all we have to deal with is bringing the power steering, loosening that bolt there, that bolt right there. I believe we're going to be using a 18 millimeter on the front and a 20 in the back, one of those two, but those are going to get that loose, and then we're going to slide it forward and then see if we can get this high pressure line off here, and that will bring the whole racket pinion loose. Okay, for the racket pinion bolts, I was able to use a 3/4. I used my impact, cordless impact right there, and I had a 15 millimeter wrench on the back side of the bolt holding it, and so we got that loose. And now we're going to do the other side. Okay, so we got the other pinion bolt out. So we don't have a pry bar, so I use as a big screwdriver and gently place it behind almost where the bolt is and pry it forward. Lift up, and you go underneath here, kind of help it out a little bit. Pry it forward some more. You see it slipping off, and then you want to go to the driver's side, and you want to follow the same procedure of putting it right about in here or here, and just prying it forward some. And what's really holding that side up is that racket, this line here, which I have to free up. So that's why I'm just inching this up. So I can have more access to it. Okay, let me show you what I did here. Right up there, attached to the power steering hose, you see this bracket right there. That bracket was bolted in. I took that bracket, the bolt loose. That gave me some more room to flex, and I was able to get my screwdriver, and you see how far out the racket pinion is. It's completely out on the passenger side, just about, and on the driver's side it's all the way out. So it exposed the high pressure line that I have to get loose inside here. Give me more room. So we're going to go on the other side now. So now you see I have more access to that nut right there, and I can be able to turn the wrench a lot more, or I can probably get some grip pliers in there to make sure that I don't strip that, because you really don't want to strip that. And pay attention, because there's going to be a copper washer underneath there as well. Okay guys, I'm gonna be as verbal as I can because I can't show step-by-step video, but you'll get the idea. Once I got the racket pinion down far enough, I got my wrench in a good bit of ways, and then I put the racket pinion back up on the holder here so I can get leverage to twist it so I can turn the wrench. So we got it broken loose, so now we can take it back off of the pinion where it goes. I just needed some leverage to break that bolt loose. So now I got my pan down here, and just in case some residue runs off, and we're going to use this 11/16 wrench and continue to loosen that the power steering what do you call that thing, the high pressure hose bolt off here. Now that we got that line loose, there's the copper washer right there. You can see some thread sealant there, but the copper washer is tied up right there. So now with that loose and the remaining fluid draining, the racket pinion can just come right down now. I don't know if I can use one hand to muscle this thing down, but let's get our screwdriver and pry it forward a little bit more. Yeah, it's definitely loose. So let's see if we can muscle it. It's not too heavy with one hand. Well, the passenger side is still a little stuck on over here, so we'll pry that forward, and she's ready to come off. And there she goes. And that's how you take off a power steering racket pinion. So now what we're going to do, we're going to take it outside and match it up with the new one to make sure they're the same. So we're going to line it up with the new one here. So we'll be right back. So this is the rack outside here, and I want to show you some difference. This is the passenger side. See how the inner tie rod is holding up on its own, and it takes force to move it, and when you move it, it stops. That's a pretty decent inner tie rod. Now notice this tie rod. You can see where it's bent right here. So it's got some damage right there, and it's just limp. This thing is just the ball joint inside is bad, but if the racket pinion wasn't bad, you see all the oil that leaks from it, you'd be able to take this plastic off, take this boot off, and then there's a kit, a puller that you would use to pull this inside pinion off, and it twists out, and then you twist the new one in and tighten it, and then you can take a clamp, what do you call those, twist ties, and tie this boot back together over here. But you would take this nut off, take this clamp off, and slide the boot back off, and then slide the boot back on and clamp it right there. But this racket pinion is no good. But this right here, this tie rod is bent right here, so that's definitely bad. Now let's get the new one and see if they match up. So here's the new racket pinion versus the old racket pinion, and what you see that we have to do, transfer the return line over to here, transfer, well, we don't have to transfer, but the high pressure line will hook up over here, so we can take this loose and get the proper seal to put it there. Put some thread lock on here, and we can get that part tightened on where it's supposed to be. But you can notice the difference. I can lift this up, and that tie right end does not move. It does not move. That is really hard to move. See, I can move this one. It's worn, but it's not completely worn like the other one. which just falls down like that. But these things are supposed to be stiff. I mean, I have to use some muscle to actually move that bar. So that's how tough those things are supposed to be. So now let's see if I have to reuse these bolts here, or if there's new threads in there, because this might be a challenge getting off, but I don't think I have a problem getting off and just cleaning it up. But we're not going to install a racket pinion now, because we have to take the A-frame loose, or the lower control arm, because we got new control arms to put on. We just wanted to make sure. Now the next thing we want to make sure, here's the old one, and you can see that smooth shaft over here, and it's rounded over here. You want to make sure that is on the left side, and that's what we have here. There it is, smooth. It's at the same angle, and then here's a little slit right there, and you got a little slit right there. So this should line up when I put it back in there. Shouldn't have no problem putting the steering column back on and getting the pinch bolt to tighten back up. So this is pretty well centered. So we're just going to put that back in the box for now until we're ready to install that. Now that we got the racket pinion out of the way, we're going to concentrate on getting this lower control arm off. And to do that, you got some 7/8 and 5/16 bolt right there, and then on the inside back there, you got to put a wrench on that to hold it, and you got one on that side, and then of course you got the loosen it from the spindle right here. But before we get into that, we have to take loose the shock strut, or the strut, which is I believe this side is a 7/8, this side is 15/16, and the bottom is I believe it's a 7/8 also. You take this strut loose from here, and then you got to get a little star wrench for the ABS to pull that loose. So the ABS, when this A-frame drops, it doesn't break this ABS. So that's what we want to take off. Then we want to take off the end-link bushings, and you just put a socket on that, and then from underneath here put another ratchet on and loosen it up, and it will come off. Either way you want to do it, just take it loose and get that out of the way. That will help drop the suspension. Since these coils have been changed, they're 2 inches shorter, it's not going to be a problem taking these coils out. That's going to be simple. So we'll show you the process afterwards and what happens. Okay, we got the strut mount bolts loose, and we got the wheel hub angled to the side. Okay, and I got the bolts where it goes on top, on the bottom. These two spacers right there and right there, they go in between there when you're putting them back on. And I put the bolt back in where the ABS goes, that bolt sitting right there. So now that's the bolt we got to take loose right there, and I believe that's a 7/8, and we want to back that up. We want to back it up like you do the calf nuts when you loosen up the tie rods and leave a few threads on, and then we're going to bang it, and it should pop loose. Okay, just a few taps, and you see that's loose right there, and you can see how loose that ball joint is, and you can see how flat it is, and the rubber is all messed up around it. So I mean, it's not too bad, but that's pretty bad. The rubber separating, it's pretty much metal on metal inside there. So we're going to get this hub off, and we'll get those two off in the back to get this tie rod inlet loose, and get those two bolts in the back loose to drop this A-frame lower and get these shock mounts out. And then we're going to install the A-frame or the lower control arm, and we're going to leave everything loose because we're waiting on the energy suppressing isolator coil rubber insulator to go around here, because when we change these coils, they were pretty bad, so we need to get some new ones now. We're going to address that issue now. So you want to get your 7/8 socket, I believe this is, on here, and your 15/16 to hold the bolt behind the lower control arm, and you want to get this one off. And then on the back end is the same thing. You just take the wrench, put it on this side there, and then the other bolt will be on the other side like that, the 7/8 that you would want to take loose. So we're going to get these two bolts loose, and then the A-frame is going to drop almost where we want it. We're going to get these bushings off, the tie rod inlet bushings. We're going to get those off to lower it even more. Okay, let me show you what I did. Since my impact gun wasn't strong enough to back that bolt off, what I did is left that there, my 7/8 wrench, and I took a hammer and beat it until it broke loose, and then I was able to put my impact socket on here to break that bolt right there. So that's how you break the inner bolt on the lower control arm. Okay, we got the passenger side coil out, and here is the bolt that goes in. The other one is down there where it attaches to. So we got the A-frame loose here. We can lower this jack, and you see the A-frame coming down, and we got that out. Now here's the ball joint, and you can see I can pull the rubber up, okay, and that ball joint is really rusty down in there. So no oil in it. This thing is supposed to be sealed, and it's supposed to have oil in it. It's not flopping on this side, but good call. All that dirt that got in there, this thing is seized, and it's metal on metal basically, because this is not supposed to be flat like that. So we got our new A-frame that we're going to install. We got to get the other A-frame off, or the lower control arm off. We have to take the bottom bolt out, the nut. I believe it's a 5/8, and you just take that loose and you transfer it to the new A-frame or the lower control arm. And it's not that heavy, but I had it on a jack so it didn't fall on me. So that's the reason I had it supporting up there. So you can see the difference in the lower right control arm. You can see how that's flat, and again I can separate this rubber piece right here, how it comes out, and it's all rusted inside there. Here's the new piece with the rubber connected, and it's full of oil or grease, and this thing is basically motionless. You can barely move that. That's how that's supposed to be. So we're gonna just put this back on here, and this notch right here, let me close up in there. This is where the coil is going to mount up to when you put it back in there. It's going to line up right there. But we have some new energy compression spring dampeners that's going to go on there. Red, that's the bottom, and this is the top. So we got new ones ordered on the way. They should be here. Today's Friday. They should be here tomorrow. So what we're going to do, we're going to get this control arm on, and we're going to just let it dangle. We're going to get the other control arm on. We're going to let it dangle. Get the back bolts in, the front bolt and the back bolt in. Then we're going to put the racket pinion back in place and get that bolted down with the new neoprene bushings for it. And we're going to make sure we get the correct copper washers to go in the high pressure holes and tighten that back up. Transfer the low pressure holes or return line with the proper copper line in it and hook that all back up. And we can put the other, and that's as far as we'll get. We'll get the tie rods probably connected on, and we'll see if we get the tie rods connect on. We may not, because we're going to have these ball joints, these hanging, waiting to put that back on. We may have the tie rods on. We'll see how far we get, but we're going to get these lower control arms on, and we're going to get that racket pinion in, and then Saturday, when the energy suppression springs come, isolated springs, bushings, we'll put everything back together. Should be ready Saturday afternoon. Okay, if you find yourself having difficulties getting the rubber bushings back in between here where the A-frame goes, you can always take a hammer and beat on the inside to open it up here, or on that side here, or on the inside here, and they can slip in, or come in through the front. When you put them in through the front, and they will slide in and get the bolts in. The bolts are almost like self-tapping, so once you get them in, you can take your socket and just ratchet it in, and then get the bolt in on the other side. Do the same thing for the other side. It can be challenging getting these lower control arms to fit back in, but we got them in. This is no really easy task, but it's not that hard. You work with it, and you can get them in. These bolts are tightened up to 148 foot-pounds. Also, this ball joint, that's tightened up to 129 foot-pounds. Okay, so 129 on that, 148 on these bolts. They get real tight, and 30 to 40 pounds on the castle nut that tightens down the outer tie rod. These bolts here, they're about 75 to 110 foot-pounds, I believe. As long as you get them real tight, you're not going to have any problem with those bolts. Because these springs are 2 inch shorter than your OME springs, I'll have no problem putting the springs in once the isolators come, because this is flexible and I can push it down and it'll pop it back up in place. So I'm gonna get as far as I can, and what I can do is take this nut loose from the ball joint, take this protective cap off, get that out of the way, and I can take the hub and I can put the hub on the spindle, and I can tighten that down to 129 foot-pounds, I believe that is. And yeah, that's the ball joint. About 129 foot-pounds is what you want to get that tightened back down to. I use my impact socket gun to take that off, so I'm gonna impact it back on, and then I'm gonna use my torque gun at 129 foot-pounds and make sure it clicks. So we got it tightened down to 140 129 foot-pounds. So to prevent from ruining a new ball joint from it sagging over, I got the coil spring holding up the control arm until I get the other side down and get the other control arm on and the other ball joint on, and then we're going to put the power steering racket pinion in, and then we're going to connect the ball joints there, or should I say we're going to reconnect the tie rods. We got the new outer tie rods. We're going to make sure we turn them in 23, make sure these axle hubs are straight as possible so that we can be pretty much straight, and then pretty much reconnect everything, the steering shaft, put the pinch bolt back in, and we can also like I said, put in the new lines, the copper wires that go in the high pressure hose and the return line, and then we can fill the power steering fluid, the power steering pump with fluid, and just let it sit there with the fluid in there. We don't have to fill it up. We can do that later. But once we get all the front end components together, the spring isolators back in the lower control arm where they belong, then we can get the tires on, and while the vehicle is up in the air, we can bleed it without even starting the vehicle, because the vehicle's up in the air. We'll just turn the key and we'll turn it from left to right, keep the reservoir open, and watch the bubbles disappear and make sure the reservoir doesn't go empty. Just keep filling it up and pouring it up until all the bubbles are gone. You can bleed it that way. You don't have to do it on the ground with the engine running, turning it from left to right. You can do that while the engine's in the air. So now we're going to go over to the other side, take off that lower control arm, and get to the point where we are here, and then we'll put the racket pinion in, and then that'll be it for today until our spring isolators come tomorrow. This is the driver's side wheel hub, and this is the lower control arm, and here's the ball joint that had me concerned. So I already got it loose, so I'm gonna pull it off. You can already see what the problem is. Okay, we got that ball joint off. See this? That's not supposed to move that easy. That ball joint is bad. That is not supposed to move at all. And see how loose that is? And so when you turn the wheel, this is what you're hearing, a knocking noise, because this is not supposed to move like that. So this ball joint here is worn, even though the boot is not separated, but it's got little cuts in it right down in there. I don't know if you can see it, my glove is in the way, but it's got little cuts in it. But that's not supposed to move like that. That ball joint is supposed to be really stiff, and if you listen, you hear sand. That's sand noise in there. So grit and dirt got in there. Let me see if I can get it. There's a good look at it right there. I peel it up. You can see right there where it's getting to separating right there, and it's got grit and stuff inside there. So that's what's wrong with this ball joint on this control arm. So we're gonna put the nut back on here, even though our new ones come with nuts. Okay, so now what we got to do is we can lower the jack stand down, and when we do that, we'll be able to have access to get this spring to come loose. Like I said, these springs, they're lowered So I'm just gonna move out of the way a little bit, but this shock strut is gonna stop that spring from coming at me if need be. Hold on a minute. I believe my bucket's in the way here. I gotta get this bucket out of the way where I got my brake caliper on. So I got to slide this more that way. There we go. So now I let that down. Okay, so that's out of the way now.
Reggie.
Huh?
I want my cat to listen what I'm going to tell you. Where you at?
Right here. So we're on the driver's side now. I got the wheel hub off. I got the spring out, and so I got the wheel, the front ball joint loose and everything. And here it is to take the control arm out, the 15/16 socket. And to loosen it up, like I said, I put that on it. I take a hammer and beat it. And that loosens it up for me, so I can put a wrench on the other end and get those loose. And on the front part, I do the same thing. I just break it, and then I can take my impact and get that one loose. So that's how we get those control arms loose. You can actually see the failure. There it is right there, holding the boot right there. Allowed sand to get in there and just ruined that. That is not supposed to be able to move like that. Bad lower control arm there. That was metal on metal right there. No lubrication whatsoever inside there. That's bad. Now here's the new driver's side, which would be the left lower control arm with the ball joint. I can't even move it. I can't even move it. See? That's how tight that thing is supposed to be. And then once again, we look at the bushing. Nice and solid. I can't even budge that thing. So that's what a good control arm is supposed to be like. So now we're going to mount this up in here, but we're going to put this protective cover over it until we're ready to mount it to make sure we don't damage that boot.